Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. CEO panics after system crash, janitor's daughter fixes it and surprises everyone. The Tower Hartman Tech, a giant of glass and steel, dominated the urban landscape of the center of San Francisco like a futuristic sentinel. Towering soaring high, it embodied the American technological dream. Each floor housed specialized departments: artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, cloud systems, robotics. It was a sanctuary of innovation, where the country's brightest minds worked in a silent and tense atmosphere, punctuated by the clacking of keyboards and the flashing of screens. At the very top, on the 73rd floor, in a panoramic office flooded with natural light, was William Hartman, a visionary and feared CEO. A man in his 50s, elegant, always dressed in black, renowned for his strategic coolness and his ability to keep a cool head, even in the worst crises. He was gazing out over the San Francisco Bay that morning, a cup of black coffee in hand, mentally analyzing the quarter's figures. Another day of quiet domination lay ahead. On the lower floors, employees were already busy. Network technicians monitored data streams, developers fine-tuned lines of code on gigantic curved screens, while team leaders moved from one stand-up meeting to the next. The air vibrated with the restrained energy of large, confident corporations. But at 10:17 sharp, an improbable event occurred. With a sudden snap, the office lights flickered briefly. The screens froze for a split second, before a stark red message appeared on each of them. System error. Main infrastructure failed. The message flashed, relentless. Then a second one appeared. Connection lost to the central server. Code, Blackcore, 0x. Employees exchanged stunned looks. Internal email systems were unresponsive. Cloud files were inaccessible. Security dashboards displayed unknown threat levels. At the executive level, a wave of panic spread like an electric shock. The technical teams, within minutes, confirmed the disaster. The Hartman Tech core network, pillar of the company, had just a total breakdown, never seen before in 10 years of existence. In less than 5 minutes, all cloud connections, the customer databases, the payment interfaces, even the internal emails, all had stopped working. In his office, William Hartman stared at his own frozen screen. His usually impassive face hardened. He felt, for the first time in a long time, the icy weight of helplessness. He jumped up, knocking his cup over onto the carpet. "Call the IT team." Immediately, he roared. His assistant jumped. "Call Mason, Jenkins, Rodriguez, everyone in the system core. Activate the red-level emergency protocol. And close the exits. No one leaves this building until this is fixed." Already, the silent crisis alarm was activating. Security shutters slid open on some doors. Engineers streamed into the server room. Disbelief mingled with anguish on every face. The heart of a tech empire was suddenly beating in the void. And at the top of the Hartman Tech Tower, William Hartman understood that, despite the billions invested in technology, the giant had an Achilles heel. In the basement of the Hartman Tech Tower, far from the luxurious offices covered in polished glass and the designer collaborative spaces, the air was heavier, quieter. Neon lights flickered occasionally above the technical corridors, and the smell of stale shoe polish hung in the building's forgotten corners. This is where he worked. Miguel Rivera, a discreet man in his late 50s, with a back slightly hunched by years of hard work. He was the shadow concierge, invisible to those he served. Every morning, before the sun pierced the bay windows of the 73rd floor, Miguel swept the halls, emptied the overflowing baskets of discarded coffee, and polished the chrome elevators that executives took without a word of thanks. He wore his dark green uniform with dignity, but he knew that he was being looked at without being seen, like a piece of scenery, interchangeable and mute. He was happy with it. For every square meter he cleaned, he did for her. His daughter, Camila Rivera. 17-year-old Camila was everything to him. He had raised her alone after his wife's death, and although they grew up in a modest apartment across town, he had sacrificed everything so she could study. Too poor to afford private school, too proud to complain, Camila had learned self-taught computing, collecting computer parts thrown into the company's dumpsters, patching up broken keyboards, studying lines of code like others read poems. That morning, she was waiting for her father in a corner of the employee break room, an old programming book on her lap, headphones in her ears. It was their secret routine. She came after her evening classes, stayed there while Miguel finished his shift, read in the hallways like a silent shadow, observing without disturbing. But that day, something strange happened. She saw the screens freeze, the faces turn pale, and then the red alert flashed through the windows. The message was everywhere. System error. Main infrastructure failed. She straightened instinctively. A shiver ran down her spine. This was not a trivial breakdown, something in the way the systems behaved, in the seconds of latency, in the way connections refused even local responses. She'd seen this in her tests, her personal simulations. A mixture of raw interruption and saturation. An attack? Or a poorly contained system bug? Camila discreetly approached a workstation left unlocked by an employee who had run out of their post. She quickly scanned the system logs still visible on the frozen screen. What she saw confirmed her fears. An overload loop was drowning out the core layer of the network. And the firewalls, too rigid, refused to grant manual access. During this time, on the 17th floor, the server room had become a hive of activity. Hartman Tech's brightest engineers milled around control screens, their faces dripping with sweat, phones pressed to their ears, and their fingers trembling over keyboards. In the center of the room, William Hartman came and went like a caged beast. His hard gaze swept the room in search of a miracle. He hated the unexpected, even more when it came from below, where he believed he had everything under control. So, he yelled, his voice cracking with anger mixed with worry. IT manager Mason looked up, his features drawn. We believe this is a DDoS attack combined with an internal kernel overload. A kind of double whammy, whether intended or induced. Our firewalls are no longer able to sort the traffic. We're trying to reboot in emergency mode, but the system is shutting down. In plain language, Grandpa William. In short, every minute that goes by means colossal losses. Our customers are losing their access and their data. We risk a loss of image, or even, critical leaks. William slammed his fist on the table, knocking over a keyboard. He had never been so helpless. And while the top of the tower burned with anguish, in a dark corner of the building, a teenage girl in a hoodie, the daughter of a caretaker, had just discovered the heart of the problem. And she knew how to fix it. In the chaotic bustle of the server room, where silent alarms still flashed on the screens, Camila had slipped in silently. She watched, crouching a few feet away, as senior engineers ran from one terminal to another, exchanging command lines that were incomprehensible to most of them, sweating under the unbearable pressure of the hierarchy. The voices overlapped. The mirror server is no longer responding either. If the system reboots without a manual purge, we will lose track of the original logs. We can't afford to make a mistake. William will tear our skin off. Camila, her eyes focused, was not intimidated. She read the error messages posted on the wall, analyzed the panicked reflexes of the engineers, and above all, she understood what no one here saw. She approached a nervous engineer with bloodshot eyes, tapping frantically on his keyboard. "Excuse me," she said softly, so as not to surprise him. "I think I know what to do. I'm familiar with this type of system. I've been studying your cloud architectures out of curiosity." The man turned to her, surprised to see a frail teenage girl, without a badge or uniform, who seemed to have come out of nowhere. "This is no place for you, kiddo. This isn't a school game, we're dealing with a national crisis," he growled, annoyed, without really listening to her. But Camila wasn't fazed. She didn't raise her voice, she didn't protest. She stepped back slightly, then added calmly, with unsettling confidence. "Have you checked if the secondary compression module hasn't overwritten the primary queue? Because given the behavior of the transfer blocks, I think the system has entered a reflex loop." Just switch via SSH to the local mirror instance and restart the memory purge before the system core goes into infinite restart. The silence that followed was almost unreal. The engineer, initially ready to dismiss her mercilessly, blinked. He stared at Camila, stunned. Other heads turned. The network manager, Mason, who had heard from afar, approached slowly. "Repeat what you just said." Slowly. Camila continued, mentally marking out the steps, word for word. What she was saying wasn't just logical, it was exactly what no one in the room had dared to consider. Mason exchanged a look with his colleagues. Then, without saying a word, he stepped aside. "Go ahead. Show us." Camila took a seat in front of the main console. She sat down slowly, placing her hands on the keyboard as if she were playing a familiar instrument. Her face was calm, focused, her gestures sure. She entered a few commands, checked the local IP addresses, established an SSH connection through an interface an engineer had left active. She bypassed the internal security modules, disabled a phantom task that was overfilling the memory cache, then issued a targeted purge command. Lines of code flew past her at breakneck speed. Then she froze for a second. She had spotted emergency backup, hidden in a dormant partition. Something that only someone who knew the structures by heart would have been able to detect. There is a copy of the pre-incident infrastructure in an unmounted volume. It is stable. I'm restarting from it. An engineer in the back whispered. It's impossible, we hadn't even seen her. Camila executed the last command. The screens, frozen for nearly an hour, suddenly began to flash. Then the red disappeared. The blue returned. Then the green. Connections resumed. Data flowed back like a restored tide. A wave of relief rippled through the room. The system had just come back online. At first, there was silence. Incredulous. Then, like a bursting dam, applause erupted. An engineer sank onto a chair, gasping for breath. Others smiled for the first time all day. Amidst the commotion, William Hartman had just entered. He stared at the screen. Then at the girl in the hoodie, sitting alone, like a pianist after a concert. He still didn't understand what he was seeing. "Who is this girl?" he asked, his voice blank. At the entrance to the room, Miguel Rivera had just arrived, out of breath, broom still in hand. He recognized his daughter, surrounded by stunned engineers. He looked up at Hartman, straight, his eyes wet with pride. "This is Camila. My daughter." William Hartman, still shaken by the events, slowly descended towards the main hall. He was no longer the confident titan of a few hours earlier, but a man aware of having narrowly escaped a fall, and of having been saved by an unexpected hand. He looked around the vast hall, where the employees were slowly returning to their activities. There, at the back, near the service elevator, he saw her, Camila Rivera. She sat on a metal bench, her fingers still black with digital dust, her oversized hoodie hanging off her shoulders. But what shone brightest wasn't her clothes or the overhead light, it was his eyes, two bright flames, lit by passion, logic and curiosity. William approached slowly, almost cautiously. "You saved Hartman Tech today." He paused. "Have you ever considered an internship with us? A scholarship? Maybe even a spot on our R&D team?" Camila looked up at him, a little surprised. She wasn't used to people in suits speaking to her in that tone. A slight smile crossed her face. "I always wanted to learn. I always wanted to be here. But I was often told that I didn't belong here." She looked around, then added, "Today, I think I'm finally there." William, touched, didn't respond immediately. He took a white badge with gold lettering from his jacket, the one reserved for members of the company's elite technical unit. He handed it to Camila. "This world needs heads like yours. And even more hearts like yours. Welcome home, Camila." 6 months later. In a modern auditorium, bathed in light and filled with investors and engineers from all over the Silicon Valley. A female figure walked toward the stage. She wasn't wearing a fancy dress or a corporate suit. Just a pair of simple black pants, a simple top, and a laptop covered in programming language stickers. Camila Rivera. From now on official intern in Hartman Tech's advanced R&D division, she was preparing to present the fruit of several months of hard work, an adaptive security algorithm, capable of anticipating system flaws based on unconventional behavior patterns, a project so innovative that several senior experts had failed to conceptualize it before her. She spoke, her voice calm but assured. I come from a world where we repair with tape and salvaged parts. Where every mistake is a silent teacher. I didn't learn this project in a classroom, but in the margins, between forgotten walls. And yet, it works. Because logic requires neither pedigree nor privilege, just a free spirit. In the room, William Hartman was sitting in the front row. This time, he wasn't standing in his office giving orders. He was listening. Respectfully. He smiled silently. Not the smile of a satisfied boss, but that of a man who knew he had been witness to a revelation. Camila wasn't just a prodigy. She was living proof that genius doesn't always wear a gold badge or a famous name. Sometimes genius comes through the back door, sweeps away established codes, and rewrites the future. And in that future, she was now in the center of the stage.